In the near future, cities will burn to the ground. The chaos will spread like wildfire, like a disease, taking out everything in its path. Today we will discuss the hyperinflation that will bring riots and civil unrest. You came here for the truth, so let me unveil that for you. Let's get into this dire situation that we are experiencing today. It's just the tip of the iceberg in Venezuela. Let's talk about this article out of Reuters. Venezuelan supermarkets are increasingly being targeted by looters as swollen lines and prolonged food shortages spark frustration in the OPEC nation struggling with an economic crisis. So first you have a stock market crash, perhaps. Could be a currency collapse. Could be many different reasons why it could occur. But as soon as people are unable to get their food, that's when everything breaks down. This is what I've been warning about for months and months on end. Not just about what's going on in Venezuela. I've been showing you this, warning you about this moment now. And here it is, officially documented. But this has been going on in most countries around the world. It's going to happen everywhere. This just happens to be a nation affected by it today. Shoppers routinely spend hours in lines to buy consumer staples ranging from corn flour to laundry soap, turning lines into venues for shoving matches, and are now more frequent attempts to plunder the shops. So is this just the first time that this has been reported? This is the only looting attempt that took place and they're writing an article about it? No. 56 incidents of looting and 76 looting attempts took place in the first half of 2015 alone. And that's the numbers that are reported. So imagine how much is actually going on. If you read further into the article, they talk about some guy getting stabbed in this lineup here. This is crazy what's happening. And basically, it's all crumbling to the ground. Why? Because we have the banksters in charge of everything, and they are able to determine exactly what happens in any nation, and they can do so having allegiance to not a single country. They are looting and plundering everyone far greater than what is happening right now in Venezuela. This is just the tip of the iceberg for what is going to occur in all countries around the world. Let's get into this right here. GMO founder Grantham says markets ripe for a major decline in 2016. Of course, this isn't GMO as in genetically modified organisms. This is the well-known fund manager who foresaw the Japanese crash, the dot-com bubble, the global financial crisis, predicted a ripe for a major decline in 2016, potentially triggering government bankruptcies. This is what I quoted in my book, talking about how the next time we have a major crisis, it's that the governments will go bankrupt. Ever since then, I've been showing you the articles of the bankrupt nations, and they're just not willing to admit it yet, simply because they have a printing press behind them, simply because they can lower the interest rates to new lows, in fact going into negative territory, somehow patching and band-aiding up the problem that they have, but it just doesn't go away. You cannot sweep this under the rug. He talked about a serious decline around the time of the US elections in 2016. I personally do not like to put a date on anything because they can always kick the can down the road, but there's a simple fact, and that is you can only do so much. Even with all of this money printing, you can only do so much. What I would have to say is that if people are experiencing what they are in Venezuela, sure, look at the stock market. It's rising incredibly right now. But it doesn't matter because the people on the streets are rioting and looting, and this is going to simply eventually really destroy the people there. Let's move on to this article here. We're looking at the Colombia peso and the Chile peso. As we see approximately at the same time here, a devaluation. you're looking at a very serious devaluation. Now, what does this do for exports? Sure, could make them more valuable in that regard, but who's buying up their products? Do they really need that now, knowing specifically that the markets are not doing so well? Perhaps a new recession is being born, and I'm talking about the government statistics here. We all know the real situation. And this is just an example of how we rate one currency versus another. So these two here are relatively trading together against the US dollar. But what about real goods? What about against something like food or land or farmland, or let's look at some other real examples. This happens to be a diagram from my book, which I've shown before. Quickly look at this right here. It's just an example of a $100 bill, and then you see, look, in 1900 I could have bought a car with that, 1950 a motorcycle, 2000 nothing but a bus pass. And what does that tell us about the value of paper currency? And that is, of course, that it is being devalued. And every day that passes, we basically encounter this inflationary policy that the Federal Reserve, that all central banks around the world, in fact, are going ahead and doing. That is printing money, devaluing the dollars, and destroying the currency. Who does that hurt? Not the central bankers, but the individuals who are holding onto that, who are earning their cash in that. Perhaps they're getting a fixed income like a pension or something like this, and they are being destroyed. There is no room for savers in this economy. They are either spending it on essentials or spending it on frivolous things. Let's move on to this as we look to China, something I've been covering very often. And actually, I'm finding that a lot of individuals here on the channel are very interested in what is happening with China. Many do not agree, but let's look at this. This is the truth. That's all I do, is I bring out the truth. There is not much of an opinion here at the Money GPS. I show you the facts. You put it together yourself. Nearly 1/3 of small investors, or more than 20 million, have fled the turbulent stock market. The number of small investors holding stocks in their accounts slid to 51 million at the end of July from 75 million at the end of June. That's official numbers right there. Now, tons of information here. I just wanted to note the highlighted portion here. Since the stock market plunge after it hit the peak in mid-June, the government in China rolled out a series of easing policies and measurements, but the results have had limited impact. You're talking about a loss of $1.1 trillion right now. So despite everything that has been occurring with the easing policies, that this is actually before the stock market began to decline. I told you about all of their policies of easing that they're beginning to implement. It didn't do a single thing, because you can see this: 1/3 of real people pulled their money out. They're scared. And of course, what happens? Well, they just ramp up the printing presses, print more money, get the market to come back up. We want people to invest in. So you print up the money out of thin air. It doesn't cost you anything to do that. And simply give it to the stocks and try and boost that up. It doesn't really seem to be working, because the stocks are declining on average, have declined significantly. But whatever, it doesn't really matter anyway. As long as you print enough money, everything can look great. Now, we all know that everything is awesome. I did an entire video about how everything is awesome. According to the Bank of America, in fact, everything is truly awesome. Let's look at this long run forecast year over year. For the next decade, the US will not experience a recession. Okay, you heard that first at the Money GPS. If anyone wants to know when the next recession will be, well, you have Bank of America stating emphatically that there will be no recession for the next decade. Don't worry about it. Pour your money into Bank of America stock while you're at it. That's their facts, not mine. Okay, let's look at this right here. These are technical analysis that I don't really like to cover too much, because ultimately I find that they're not too accurate when stuff hits the fan, if you know what I'm talking about. But I like to cover it just to note this is one chart that's pretty interesting to see. You can see at the top right corner there, the overbought, then leading into a little bit of a dip there. And at the very bottom, we see small cap performance deteriorates against large caps. We can see the separation here. Now, what I want to note about this is simply the fact that, like I talked about in my previous video, you have incentives to buy up shares of the stock market. But who gets bought up? Well, big companies like Apple, like Exxon. We're talking about the biggest names in the business that get bought up. So their stocks can continue to rise. While the actual market as a whole may be declining, you have a few select stocks from individual industries, and basically that allows the market to stay relatively consistent, although there is volatility when the real players begin to pull their money out. But we have central banks around the world, one being the Swiss National Bank, for example, buying up shares of the S&P. And you know specifically that this is being done intentionally to prop everything up. It's not being done for any other reason. This is all to prop up the stock market so that people are not going to be in fear, but it doesn't seem to be working. And this right here is a little bit more propaganda. It is no more than a coincidence that Viacom announced weak earnings and suffered a sharp plunge in its stock market on the same day that one of its biggest stars, Jon Stewart, exited the stage. This is according to the New York Times. But really what I wanted to note is that if you look and really look at the actual fundamentals over the previous years, look at it for hundreds of years and really study the stock charts, study the economic events that took place, and actually just look at it. Forget about necessarily these numbers all behind it, and just look at the direction that they head compared to the event that takes place. You will find specifically that when a particular industry is taking a nosedive, no matter what's happening with that, let's say technology stocks happen to be the thing of the past. All of a sudden, nobody wants computers or electronic devices again. Let's just say that. Well, the entire industry will move downward. Apple could be doing amazing. Their actual unit sales could be doing great and everything's going great. But the whole industry as a whole is declining, then the Apple stock will most likely do poorly as well. Now, of course, there are anomalies to this, but this is a general rule. The industry moves together. But then, if you zoom out even further, you see that the stock market, that particular stock market, let's say it's the S&P 500, that moves together. Yes, of course, industries, necessarily maybe tech stocks are down, but maybe mining is up, for example. But in general, if you really zoom out, you'll see that that particular stock market moves up or down together on any given day. But zoom out even further, you'll see all of the markets in the US perhaps are going down. Zoom out further, you see even more correlations. What is happening here is that all of the markets are interconnected completely. They are part of one ecosystem. They will all fall together. When that occurs, the central bankers will react. They will print currencies. The currencies will be devalued, and you will have people suffering. When they suffer, they will go onto the streets and they will begin to riot. I assure you, it's happening in Venezuela today, and it will happen in every major city around the world. If you found this video informative, please give me a thumbs up. Last but not least, if you like this video, I know that you will find my book, The Money GPS, even more informative. You can actually flip through the book. If you go over to Amazon, they have this look inside feature, which allows you to flip through the book and see if you like it for yourself. Take care.